Hey, good evening, everybody. How are you? This is Freddie Ewan, three-time GM of the Year, 2024, 2022 Pantheon Cup Champion, and the 2024 runner-up. It is Monday night. The first week of the NFL is almost over, and I got one of the most fantastic guests that you can imagine on. One of the very few who has also won a Pantheon Cup in the TPFFKL. And also, this is just going to be a fantastic year because he is my co-GM in the John Galt League, Mr. James Winchell. Very exciting. How are you, James?
Great, Freddie. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great. I'm great. So, if you don't know James, James has been on the show a couple times. I love this guy. I call him the Rain Man of fantasy football because it's like I'm drafting with you the other day, and I'm saying let's pick this guy, and you're coming back. You're like, well, he's got 36% in the slot. He's got a 86% root round ratio. I don't think it's a good idea if he's going up against a 4-3. So you definitely know your stuff, my man.
I appreciate it, Fred.
So tonight's going to be an interesting game. This is,
Yeah,
I think after last night, yesterday, the Detroit Lions offense was awful. And it's only 1 week, but it's going to be a really interesting game tonight to watch to see how the Bears do with Ben Johnson. He's the talk of the coaching and whatnot, especially in fantasy.
sure. Yeah, it's always tough to assess after the first game because these guys get the schedule back in May, and look, the Green Bay defense had 4 months to prepare for Detroit and whatever it is that they might do. Yeah, Ben Johnson's gone, Glenn's gone on defense. Like there's so many things changing that it's really hard to lock in on exactly what is how much responsible for the changes that you're seeing. And at the same time, when you've planted your flag on a particular player, good or bad, whatever the result, it's really tempting to either go running through the streets, panicking that everything's burning, or to start talking a lot of trash that you may find yourself eating in just a week. So, um, I think in the next few weeks we'll start to learn a little more. We've already seen, just within our own leagues, some people starting to, what do they like to call it? Overreaction Monday, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so you start to see that, and it's going to be interesting. But I think certainly when Detroit plays Chicago next week, if they can't get properly motivated and show a fire against the offensive coordinator who bailed on them, right? And certainly if I'm in that locker room, that is the
Absolutely.
storyline that I am drumming. Forget the fact that anybody in Ben Johnson's shoes would have taken the opportunity, right?
Absolutely. Sure.
But if they can't get up for that game and really come out and deliver, I do think there's going to be a lot of panic. And for those who are worried about Detroit, their center retired. One of their guards left the team, so the interior of their offensive line is gone. Their current OC, there is evidence of what this guy is like, calling games outside of a Ben Johnson world, and it's not fantastic. Now there are those who say, well, he was a big part of helping Ben Johnson figure out how to take the approach they had, right? And this is what we're going to be navigating through to figure out, like, did it make sense for people to start fading Montgomery because there's not necessarily going to be enough touchdown production for both Gibbs and Montgomery to be productive. You'll see the same thing at wide receiver with St. Brown and Jameson Williams.
Just
Um,
a little idea on, just a little couple stats. Montgomery actually out carried Gibbs 11-9. Both of them didn't really, one had 19 yards, the other one had 25. Montgomery he was involved in the passing game, targeted 4 times, 4 receptions. And I think for Gibbs owners, I don't think there's really anything or panicked yet. He was targeted 10 times and he had 10 receptions, only 31 yards, but he still had 10 receptions.
yeah, and I mean, look, Montgomery has a pretty lengthy injury history. So I think over the course of the season, um, what is it's something crazy historically where like Gibbs scored 8 fantasy points more per game last year when
Yeah, yeah.
Montgomery was out
Hmm.
hurt than when
Yeah.
he was when
Hmm.
it's there.
Right.
So we'll have to see how that all plays, but I do think there will be a point later this season, where Jahmyr Gibbs will have his fantasy value escalate to where he was being drafted, which was, probably closer to the ceiling. And when you are a top 7, 8 pick, you're always going to be drafted near your ceiling. So,
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
that point will come.
So, the Chicago Bears going up against one of the tougher defenses in the NFC today. It's gonna be it's gonna be interesting. I know that, you look at that Bears team and they have a lot of good components on that team. They got some young guys, they got some Williams, who was really overshadowed last year by, a lot of rookie quarterbacks. Williams was really overshadowed by that guy in Washington. Bo Nix overshadowed him a little bit, but
Mhm.
it's going to be really interesting tonight too. I know you're high on a couple guys like that running back that they have, Swift. I'm really high on
Absolutely.
DJ Moore, a Dunzy. It's gonna be interesting, and the rookie tight end too. It's gonna be interesting to watch that team because they got a lot of tools and they can put some offense on.
They do, and they also made some upgrades on the offensive line in the offseason, which is certainly going to add another factor. I think for the Bears, it's a lot clearer what to expect with the running game than it is with the passing game, just because of how many strong tools they have within that passing game, right? So, Swift has worked with Ben Johnson before. Johnson's been commenting throughout the offseason about how Swift has developed better patience in terms of, letting things develop in front of him, instead of trying to, force things to happen, or, seeing a little hole to the left and going completely away from the play and away from where, all of his support's going to be. I think Swift's going to have a huge year. I think Caleb Williams is going to have a huge year. Because honestly, anybody who can make Jared Goff into what Jared Goff has been
Absolutely, absolutely.
has a level of talent. And I think that most people would say that Caleb Williams, has that stronger skill set. But then, you throw in DJ Moore was a top 6 fantasy wide receiver with Justin Fields like 2 years ago.
Yep. And
Um,
and
you
Fields
know,
and Fields can't pass. I mean, he's not known for passing the ball either.
Right, right. And then you've got guys like Odunze and Luther Burden, who a lot of people are high on as it goes on. And then, honestly, the guy who's been getting all sorts of buzz out of camp is Olamide Zaccheaus, who may keep one of those other three off the field a little bit, um,
He's been
which
on.
sounds like a crazy thing to say.
He's been on, I mean, I know he was on the Eagles for a little while. He was on the Falcons for a little while, and I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but you will see that guy have huge games sometimes. Like there's been a couple times where he has had huge games, like 2 touchdowns, which absolutely in Ben Johnson's offense, it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's going to be
For
interesting.
sure. For sure.
Yesterday, everyone's talking about the Ravens and the Buffalo Bills, and those guys are gonna, I mean, you expect fantasy points out of those guys almost. There were a couple shockers yesterday, and the first one I want to talk to is obviously, I and like again, James, it's the first week, but the Cincinnati Bengals, they won the game. They put 17 on the points on the board. Let me just give you a couple stats. Joe Burrow threw the
Yeah,
ball
sure.
23 times, 14 completions, only had 113 yards and a touchdown. Chase Brown got a lot of carries, 21 carries, only got 42 yards, had a touchdown, which pretty much saved him fantasy wise, or he would have been shut out. And then really, I mean, this guy is probably, he's probably a late second, early third round pick. Higgins had 3 receptions for 33 yards, and the number one overall pick in fantasy football this year, Jamar Chase, only 2 receptions, 26 yards. He was targeted 5 times. they played the Cleveland Browns. I mean, I don't think the Cleveland Browns have a decent defense, but I don't think it's
Yeah.
anything to, so you tell me, you tell me.
Well, important to note that Cleveland missed a PAT that would have been the 17th point of the game. Um, so, gosh, you go back over the last few years, and the Cincinnati Bengals have probably been responsible for taking more people out of survivor pools than any other team on the planet.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Notorious for getting slow starts. You go back a couple seasons, and Burrow was hampered, with an injury for the whole offseason. Last year, I think Jamar Chase wasn't practicing because he was holding out for his contract. This year, unless someone's going to make an argument that Trey Hendrickson holding out affects the offense somehow, there's no excuse that should allow this to happen. Um, Cincinnati has a terrible habit of getting out to a really slow start. Um, and what, they lost to the Patriots last year. They got extremely lucky this year. Um,
Absolutely.
I really like this isn't what you're going to see out of Cincinnati, over the course of the season. Again, Jim Schwartz had 4 months to draw up a defensive plan against Cincinnati. Maybe that amounts to a lot. Myles Garrett looked fantastic. I
Sure.
can come up with reasons for Cincinnati not to feel terrible about this, but the reality is this is the sort of game that results in Cincinnati having to go on the road if they want to get to the Super Bowl, and they are just their own worst enemy. Um,
And it's like, I mean, just on, it's just, on the other side, and like you said, if you were an IDP lead, Miles Garrett, is this guy not one of the best defensive players? 2 sacks, three quarterback hits.
yeah.
We're going to get to this in a little bit too. I mean, Cleveland on the other side, I mean, Cleveland doesn't really have anyone. Judy had a different game, 5 receptions, 66 yards. The next one I want to talk about really quick while we're going through this is, I mean, there's a couple games I want to talk to you about, but let's get to this one right here. I mean, this, a couple years ago, the Miami Dolphins, I mean, you remember, this coach was supposed to be he was
Yeah.
supposed to be the Ben Johnson, pretty much the offensive juggernaut, Tua has struggled with injuries, obviously, throughout. But when Tua was there were times a couple years ago. It wasn't last year, but when Tua was on there, I mean, there was a ton. They scored a ton of points. They have a ton of offensive talent on that team. I mean, a chain when he's on, he's healthy. But it's just like, I mean, I didn't draft a whole lot of Miami Dolphins, and I certainly one guy I did not draft was Tyreek Hill. I mean, I took Waddle a little bit, but and a chain I think is gonna, a chain, just to give you his line is, he had 3 receptions, 20 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 7 carries for 55 yards, so not bad. But once again, the wide receivers were just awful. No one's starting Tua in a fantasy football league these days either. Is this going to be the
Yeah.
worst offense in the NFL?
Boy. So, I have a couple of thoughts that jump out to me here. The first one is that when we judge the quality of an offense, we have a habit to look at the skill position guys, right? Jalen Waddle had an amazing rookie year, still stayed a really strong number two with Tyreek Hill coming in. Um, eh, you know, Achan's been fantastic, but um, it's hard to get the image out of one's mind of, to his hand after that one concussion hit. And if you have a quarterback that is that susceptible to concussions, it is beyond unconscionable to ignore the offensive line the way that the
Oh,
Miami
absolutely.
Dolphins have.
Absolutely. I think, not only ignore the offensive line, but you see so many teams that have good backup quarterbacks and they have Zach Wilson as their backup quarterback. It's like it just makes
Yeah.
sense.
But if nothing else, I'm making sure that my offensive line 1 through 5 are the absolute best guys that I can get, and I'm plugging some of that in free agency, and I'm plugging some of that in the draft. Um, and the reality is those guys were there this offseason, right? You referenced Minnesota,
Oh,
playing tonight. They
absolutely. There
went
were
out and picked up
plenty
two
of guys
guys
out
from
there.
Indianapolis.
Yep, absolutely,
Right. And
absolutely.
and and let me tell you, Will Fries is a Cranford guy, which is where I live. And so I keep an eye on this. He's a really incredible offensive lineman. And if you're trying to open up the run game to get H-Hand to break loose, you need that. If you're trying to keep Tua upright because you know that your team's performance is night and day, um, but depending on if he's in the game, you invest in that.
Absolutely.
And frankly, I don't know how much of this is that the coach hasn't sort of evolved his offensive scheme a little bit as people kind of figure him out and figure out how to attack it defensively. And I don't know how much of this is just the GM and the ownership, failing to do what they need to do to set everybody up for success. But I
I
feel
mean, my
pretty solid, even if it is 1 week, to say that Coach Mike is going to need to start the watch that he left set on a fixed time 3 days.
Very quickly. And I think, I don't know, just the whole Miami organization has been a disaster for a long time. On the other side, being a Giant fan, I don't know how good you feel about this, but Daniel Jones tore it up yesterday. I mean, this guy, 22 of 29, I think it was the second quarterback behind
Yeah,
Allen or something. He had a passing touchdown. He had 7 rushes, 26 yards, and 2 tutties rushing. I mean,
yep,
Daniel Jones looked like a stud yesterday.
he did.
Got the ball around. Jonathan Taylor did his job. Michael Pittman, a great game from Michael Pittman. One guy that we didn't see, Josh Downs. Everyone was high on him. He only had 3 targets for 2 yards. But we took Pittman in the John Galt draft, and we took him late and cheap. And we didn't start him, but he's some guy that I think we're definitely going to hold on to. His stat
Yeah,
line: 6 receptions, 80 yards, a touchdown, targeted 8 times. I mean, Indianapolis looked good yesterday. They were playing the Dolphins, but they looked good.
right. And so, again, week 2, we're gonna learn a lot here because Drake May is going to be facing the Miami defense. And if Drake May comes out looking in week 2 the way that Daniel Jones did in week 1, then we will have learned a whole ton about Miami, but
Right.
not necessarily a ton about those two quarterbacks. If
Right.
Miami shuts him down, the information is going to be a little muddier. But I am hoping that there is something to Indianapolis in that, I started picking up a lot of Pittman late in draft season once it was announced that Jones was going to be the quarterback
I,
because
you know,
Anthony
it's
Richardson's a nightmare.
it's funny because when you were high on Pittman and I don't ever like I learned a long time ago not to question your picks, but in the back of my head I said Pittman and
It's
look,
on all hit.
look. So let's move to a couple guys here. I'm going to share my screen up.
All
Let's
right, what do
get
we
this
got?
going. And first thing we are going to start with this was an interesting week for this guy because you heard things in the beginning of the week that it's
Good
going to be
old
a big
Bill.
committee. He's not
Yeah.
going to be anything. And then like an hour before the game, you hear Rodriguez is in. He's the starter
Yep.
and he produced. I mean, he came out and produced.
Yep.
I took this guy really early in one round in one big league of mine, and I was a little like this week. I have a friend who said, if you got him, trade him. And it seems like everyone really changed their mind on him. This guy might be. I don't know. I don't know. He had 10 carries, 82 yards, and a touchdown. He broke one for 42 yards, and
Yeah.
I don't know. You tell me.
So I meant to look this up before you and I got on today, but you're the Eagles fan, so you may remember. So 2 years ago, the Eagles made inactive one of their running backs in week 1. And I feel like it might have been Swift. And everybody completely panicked. um, about what that meant for Swift going forward. But the thing was that the Eagles had the Thursday game for week 2. Swift started, went on to have an incredible season,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And I haven't heard anybody mention it yet, but I'm really wondering if that's part of what this thing was with Chris Rodriguez.
Healthy
Did
scratch.
they sit him, keep him fresh so that they had something new to throw out at their opponent for week 2? That'll be interesting to see. I thought Eckler, I was really expecting him to get a little more work. Um, but I don't think it's going to be clear for a few weeks really what it is that the Commanders have in mind to do. I do know, however, that if I was the Commanders, I'm not pulling it all out against the Giants.
And just to give you some stats on Eckler too, Eckler was involved. He had he had 6 carries for 26 yards. JCM had 4 more carries. JCM was only targeted once, no catches, and Eckler 3 targets, 3 catches for 31 yards, not a bad showing in the passing game.
For sure.
So, Jeremy McNichols got in there a little bit. He actually had, 4 carries for 26 yards, but I agree. It's going to be interesting going forward. Here is a running back that is going to be interesting going forward because, once again, we got him pretty cheap in the John Galt League, but I was on the phone with you, bet like we got to take Braylon Allen. We got to take Braylon Allen. And, thinking like, all right, Breece Hall, but Breece Hall had a hell of a game yesterday.
Well, and look, Brees Hall has the injury history. I mean, the one major, right, where it's always worth having, the Braylon Allen guy on your roster so that if it should happen in week 7 that Brees Hall goes down for the year, we're not in a position of having to spend our full fab budget on Braylon Allen when there are other better uses that we could have for that money. But
Breece Hall,
Brees Hall's a
19.
guy I planted my flag on. I have him in at least 40% of my best ball leagues. I have him in both of my full season leagues where he wasn't kept. And here's a couple stats I'll throw out for you. Last season, the Jets were 16th in run efficiency, but only 30th in total runs. And that was because Nate Hackett has never called an offensive play in his life, in spite of having been an offensive coordinator for multiple teams and a head coach for a third. And Aaron Rodgers has, full permission to do whatever the heck it is that he wants to do as a QB. So, a lot of Brees's struggles last year, um,
That makes a lot of sense.
they were predictable,
Yeah.
right? But
Mhm.
with Glenn coming in as the head coach, they're trying to set up a similar offensive scheme to what Detroit has had the last few years, to what we're expecting Chicago to show off tonight. Um, and many people, and unfortunately I was part of this, drafted Brees in spite of the warning signs last year. And then when that happens, you get this kind of post-hype situation where a guy is going for prices that are just inexplicable relative to the offensive system he's in and what we should expect this year, independent of, some of that bad fortune this year. I
I
expect
mean,
the
and
Jets to be a top 5 offensive running team this year. And I think Brees Hall is going to be a huge part of that. Um, yeah, it's
and the,
1 week, but
the
man, nobody
Jets
was
have the
expecting the Steelers to, give up 32 points.
no, and believe it or not, the Jets, this was this is probably their toughest defensive opponent. They have a very easy schedule. I think they might have the number one
Yeah.
easy schedule when it comes to running back. So it's like, and I mean, so far you're looking like I said, I'm glad you're my co-GM. You're looking like a genius almost.
It's only 1 week, but hopefully it continues.
We got this guy too. Jake Dobbins leads the backfield for the Denver Broncos. This guy is just like, wherever he goes, he's been there. I mean, he's been
Yep.
there. I don't think you have to worry too much if you are RJ Harvey owners. I think Harvey is going to get in there and I mean, Harvey actually had a great game. He had 6 carries, 70 yards, and he broke a 50-yard one, but Dobbins, 16
Right.
carries. Obviously, they gave him the ball, 63 yards and a touchdown.
Yep.
Um, and Dobbins, same, I mean, Dobbins, both of them were really involved in the passing game. Wasn't a high scoring game. The Denver defense obviously is
Yeah.
phenomenal, but, you know, Dobbins, give me your thoughts on the Denver backfield with Dobbins and Harvey and where you think it's going to go.
Yeah. So I think that the key here is whether this ends up being a two-man backfield or a three-man backfield, right? The reality is there's only one team in the NFL last year that gave 70% or more of their carries to one of their running backs. Incidentally, that was Los Angeles Rams with Kyron Williams. Many teams in the 60s, but the Broncos backfield has been worthless over the last
Year.
couple of years, but it's been
Yeah.
worthless specifically because
Since
it's
Terrell
been
Davis
split
owned.
up between Javante and McLaughlin and Estime and some other random they've had it be that three-way split where the guys individually don't deliver in line with what Denver's offensive running system does as a team. And so if this stays a two-man backfield, I think that both Harvey and Dobbins are going to do great. I think that either once Dobbins gets hurt, which is generally when, not if, or the bye, if that comes first, I think that Harvey is going to steadily take over that system as the year goes on. But Peyton historically has had really good fantasy running backs when he sticks with two. And I think for Dobbins and Harvey owners, that's what they've got to be rooting for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I mean, Dobbins was, this guy has been almost, you've taken him in and it seems you're right. He does get banged up a lot. It seems early in the year he does a ton and then just kind of comes off a little bit. Let's talk about the, I mean, I knew this guy was going to be good.
Yeah,
I knew this dude was going to be good, and I knew he was going into a great situation in Tampa. I knew, with Godwin out, being across from maybe the most consistent wide receiver in the NFL. But I mean, I knew this guy was going to be good, but I mean, he was really good yesterday.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I was expecting it to take a little more time than all this, but I think, for those people who started, pushing him up into the fourth, fifth round of snake drafts, I'm sure they're feeling validated today. And it's just going to be a question of, is he able to maintain that consistency week in, week out? And then, the rumor, of course, is that Godwin's targeting a week five return, but is week five going to stay week five? And then even when he comes back, what is the ramp up period looking like? And has Ibuka just claimed the role by that point, such that
I
Godwin's
mean,
trying to find another spot to fill in
He
to really
looks
make a
he looks
contribution.
like he looks like a beast, and I think Mike Evans owners don't have to be worried. I mean, Evans, Emeka took the touchdowns yesterday, but Evans still had 8 targets, Emeka had 6, and 5 receptions for Evans, 4 for Emeka. But so I think really if you're an Evans owner, you don't really have to worry that much. Baker's gonna get the ball around to everybody.
Yeah, I mean Evans has had 1,000-yard season, I think, every year he's been in the league.
Every
So
year. I mean, very,
um,
very consistent.
that'll end at some point, but I don't necessarily think we're there just yet, barring an injury.
I mean, this guy, so, just to give you the story on this guy, I took him in the TFPFKL, but I laid off of him totally because I, and it, because I I don't know whether this guy, and I think a lot of people in fantasy don't know whether this guy is a wide receiver or a defensive back, and really how Jacksonville was going to use him. I think he played 6 or 7 snaps on defense, but he was mostly offense. Um, Led in targets, I mean, he had
Yeah.
had a great game. Travis, I mean, not, I mean, I don't know if it was a great game. He had 8 targets, 6 receptions, 33 yards, but I think this guy's going to be all right. I mean, I think he's going to be all right to keep. Brian Thomas did not have a good game yesterday. Jacksonville is still, Trevor Lawrence should have ripped the Carolina Panthers defense apart. They won the game 26-10, but Lawrence really wasn't that impressive either.
Yeah, it's sort of hard to interpret these games that end up having a 90-minute lightning delay.
Yeah.
You know, when this became a thing, I'm not really sure because
This
I'm
year it
pretty
seemed.
sure that zero people have ever been killed by lightning in an NFL game. But you know, I think both for the Eagles, Cowboys, and for the Jaguars, Panthers, the game before and after the lightning storm felt very different, and
Oh,
I don't know how much game plan adjustments and whatnot is happening, while all that's going on. Um, again, I think in the case of Jacksonville, I'm not opening up my whole playbook for Carolina. Um, and
I
I'll just say personally, I do not trust Trevor Lawrence. But any coach who can do with Baker Mayfield what Liam Cohen did, I'm certainly going to maintain an open mind. But
Absolutely. It's funny you talk about the Lightning games too, and I think this might be the first year, but it was just first of all, I got no work done on Friday, watching the Eagles game Thursday night, and the first half was fantastic. I mean, I think that everyone they just kept scoring
yeah,
and scoring and scoring. I mean, that game was
yeah,
looking like it was going to be the Buffalo Ravens game last night, and then the lightning storm comes and I think 3 points made. I don't even know if there were any points or hardly any first downs for the rest of the game, which was almost the entire second half, and it got really boring. And the same
for
thing was
sure,
really similar with Jacksonville yesterday.
for sure.
It's just like.
Yeah, well, both the Cowboys and the Ravens were in postseason form. The Cowboys choked, and so did the Ravens. So
So you were big on another guy here.
I was.
I was debating, I have both of them on a team, and I was debating which one to start, and I said, you know what? I heard Coleman was a little banged up, or there was some injury earlier in the week, and
Yeah,
I had Palmer in, and I said, you know what, just go with Coleman, and I'm glad I did. Coleman, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 112 yards, a touchdown. I mean, the touchdown wasn't really, but he scored a touchdown. I mean, he led in targets and receptions. He looked like Josh Allen's number one guy.
he did.
And he's a big dude. I mean, he is a big dude. Shakir is not a big guy. And I think that, you really need that big receiver almost to be a really good passing offense. And this might be the guy, but you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, Shakir's the slot receiver. Ravens did an incredible job defending the middle of the field yesterday. I think that created a lot of headaches for Buffalo for the first 3 quarters. It felt to me like Allen was forcing the ball into Coleman, particularly on those 2-point conversions, which both ended up failing. Um, I think he's going to have to do a little bit of a better job spreading it around, but I would almost interpret it as when the defense is really creating problems for Allen, um, you know, he's going to lean on the guy that he trusts the most. So right now, that definitely appears to be Keon Coleman.
And it's it was Keon Coleman did not have a very good year last year, his rookie year. I think he might have been he was either taken in the late first or early second round by the Bills.
Yeah, I
And
think they traded up to the first to get him,
yeah, something, yeah, and really
or me, yeah,
just did not do much. I mean, we can spend a whole thing on that game. If you were a Ravens owner and you own the top three guys, Zay Flowers, 7 receptions, 142 yards and a touchdown. Derrick Henry. I mean, Derrick Henry, besides the fumble,
Right.
doesn't matter if you're a fantasy guy because 18 carries, 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, both Lamar and Josh Allen, it's like, they were picked the two top quarterbacks in fantasy football. And I think last night they really showed you why too.
Yeah, I think that was easily the best game of the weekend. But I think it also showed very clearly why each team does as well as they do and gets as deep as they do in the postseason. But defensively, it also, I think, really showed why they haven't been able to get to the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can, I think one of those two teams are going to the Super Bowl. I think. All right, few more guys to get through here.
Sure.
Uh, Kittle's going to be out a couple weeks now. Jennings is out. Ayuk is out. There is really one guy left in San Francisco, which is Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall had a great game yesterday. CMC had a great game yesterday. I mean, are these guys, both Ricky Pearsall and CMC, health-wise, let's just say CMC stays healthy the whole year, Ricky Pearsall stays healthy the whole year. There's no one left. Are these guys just going to blow it up between the two of them?
So, I have two immediate thoughts. One, the nature of CMC's, tendonitis, I I I honestly don't think he gets to October without ending up missing some time.
CMC was on
Um,
the field almost all day yesterday. They did it for
100%,
22
100%.
times. They
The
threw it to him
the
10 times.
the challenge that they have as a team though is with Jennings out, with Kittle out, with all their backup running backs outside of Brian Robinson hurt and Robinson still running the playing book. I think that is going to be putting a lot of pressure on CMC. And I think it's going to become a situation where we see a lot of defenses really keying on Pearsall in a way that you just don't know that he can handle that level of attention until he's done it.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, Pearsall's still a young guy and just,
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
It's asking a lot.
I agree. There's going to be a ton on him. I'm going to skip over this guy because we kind of talked about this a little bit.
Sure.
Wanted to get to this guy. This is interesting over here. We actually got the opportunity to pick this guy up,
Yeah.
and I was happy we picked him up because it looks like Trey Benson is going to be a part of this Arizona Cardinals offense.
Sure.
Connor was still the man yesterday. But I think Benson, let me just bring up what, once again, they played the Saints, but, Benson, Connor had 12 carries, Benson had 8 carries. Benson was targeted once, Connor was targeted 4 times. Connor got the touchdown. But what do you think about Trey Benson? And you think that, Connor
Yeah.
he's been relatively healthy for the most part, but you think if Benson's gonna get an opportunity, he's gonna
Well,
really take off?
Connor, like CMC, is a guy that if you look at his games played year after year, this is a guy who spends a lot of time hurt. And it feels like the Cardinals are taking a very different approach to what you're seeing out of the 49ers. And I think Benson is a big part of the plan to keep Connor healthy. Um,
You
he
could see
didn't
that
look
yesterday too.
particularly fast yesterday. Um, again, it was the Saints, right? So I don't want to necessarily read too much into it. But I think from a usage standpoint, really positive sign. Very curious to see where this goes over the next few weeks.
Yeah, so am I. I'm glad we got him. I can't believe we
That was
got
a
him.
great call on your
I
part and great pickup.
I believe, I can't even believe he was available, but in the John Galt League, I believe everything. Um, so this is gonna be, I wanna really see what Colston does tonight with the Bears.
Yeah,
But I mean, Tyler Warren was great yesterday.
yeah.
I don't know if he's going to be the guy, the Bowers of last year,
Yeah.
maybe the Laporte of the year before. But I mean, I think he looked really good and probably a really good tight end to have.
Yeah, I think I think for Warren, the key for him is going to be that Daniel Jones stays the quarterback. Because
It's a
Daniel
big if.
Jones um, needs that safety valve, and I think has a tendency to go for the long bomb way too often. But if he's got someone who is higher up on the list in terms of the reads and progressions that Jones is going through, I think that's actually good for Indianapolis, good for Jones, and certainly good for Warren owners.
And yeah, it's like, I mean, I really went back and forth with drafting. I think I took Colston a lot more than I did Warren. Um, I think I think they both might be good, but it's gonna be really, like I said, it's gonna be really interesting watching this game tonight,
Yeah.
watching this Bears game. Um, all right, one tough thing if you're Kenneth Walker owners is this is, let me ask you, is it time to panic if you're a Kenneth Walker owner with how Zach Charbonnet played yesterday?
So, again, one game. I think that pro Charbonnet people will say, Kenneth Walker misses time every year. They're right in saying that. Kenneth Walker was injured, for some extensive portion of the preseason. They're right on that. But ultimately, if you look at the history of these guys, um, I think it just sets up better for Kenneth Walker. Uh, Last year, the Seahawks had a power gap blocking scheme that actually favors Charbonnet a little bit, just based on their run styles. This year, they've gone to a zone blocking scheme, which, based on history, heavily favors Kenneth Walker. I think with Walker missing time in the preseason, they basically went every other drive, right? They were switching out which running back was in, and it just happened that
Absolutely.
one or two of those drives that Charbonnet was in, he had some opportunity because the Seahawks did better on that drive. I
And
think as a team, they're still learning to probably to adjust to that new blocking scheme. It's a little bit of a different skill from an offensive line standpoint. Um, that may take a few weeks. Um, really thought that Seattle should have won that game yesterday. And certainly I am disappointed by it, but I'm not reacting too strong just yet.
and I don't really, even looking at the stat line, Charbonnet had 12 carries, Walker had 10. Walker only had 2 yards in average. Charbonnet had 3.9, and Charbonnet got the touchdown. But Walker's longest was 8. Charbonnet's longest was 7. Charbonnet did not get targeted at all in the passing game. Walker had 3 targets, 3 receptions. He only had 4 yards out of it. But
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
said, still, I mean, I think if you're gonna look at their numbers were probably pretty equal fantasy wise. You know.
I mean, really, the troubling thing to me about Seattle's results yesterday is I think San Francisco is terrible this year. And I am definitely on an island in saying that because I think, Vegas has them at 10.5 as the over-under
It might
for
not now.
wins.
That might change.
But, they lost Drake Greenlaw. They lost a lot of guys on the defense. Their offensive line got worse. But for the defensive losses that San Francisco suffered, for Seattle not to deliver a much stronger message yesterday, that's orange flag,
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
almost a red flag, maybe not quite,
Well, Seattle, just Seattle did not look good, and Sam Darnold did not look
for
good.
sure.
So, last
Sure.
thing I'm going to ask you before we go,
Yeah,
one item that I'm going to be watching tonight is everyone's talking about the Chicago offense on the other side of the ball. Um,
sure.
I loved this guy. I took him all over where I could get him. Um, Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones. What do you think is going to happen? What my opinion is, Aaron Jones is probably going to get a lot of the work, but I think as you go through the year, Mason's still a young guy. I think Mason's probably going to take over much of that running back work.
Yep.
And that's also if Jones can stay healthy in the entire year.
Yeah, Aaron Jones is a guy that I wish I had a lot more of. To be perfectly honest, last year was the first time in a long time that he had gotten through the season healthy, but he delivered very consistently. I think that Jordan Mason is going to end up being used in sort of a role like we discussed for Trey Benson, where he's maybe going to be getting about 35% of the snaps and carries, with an eye on trying to keep Aaron Jones healthy. And then in those games when if and when Aaron Jones were to break down, that's where you'll see Jordan Mason really take off and make things
Mason's
interesting.
a big guy though too, isn't he?
He is,
So
for
he's going to
sure.
get a lot of but Jones is a big guy also. They're very similar, I would think. Like
Sure.
who's going to get the goal line work almost?
Sure. Yeah. And one guy I think that not enough people are talking about right now is TJ Hawkinson. Um, Michigan's pass game when JJ McCarthy was there was not particularly vertical. Colston Loveland was drafted to Chicago in the first round because of how productive he was at Michigan with JJ McCarthy. Um, you know, the Minnesota offense has really focused heavily on the tight end position since Hawkinson got there. Hawkinson was, I think, second back in 23 before he had the knee injury. And he's somebody that I think could really take off and I think from the beginning tonight.
You're going to love this, James. The game has started, and we're going to leave you at this. Caleb Williams, first drive so far, 4 of 4,
Yeah.
27 yards. DeAndre Swift, I think, has 2 receptions, 11 yards. So looking good so far, Chicago.
All
Anyway,
right. I'll
everyone
take it.
enjoy the game tonight. The Rain Man of fantasy football, Mr. James Winchell. So thank you so much for being on the show. Love to have you as always. Hopefully, we'll get you on more over the year and just get to hear your points. I think if people really watch and pay attention, they can learn a shitload from you. Cousin Pat, listen in. Thanks
Thanks,
so much,
Freddie. Much
guys.
appreciated.
Have a great night.
You too. Bye.